Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of the Haqiqat Show, where we discuss religion and politics, the two least controversial subjects. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Haqiqatjou, and we have a very interesting, hopefully controversial show for you today, where we discuss recent events and what has been happening in Palestine and in Lebanon. This has been a very harrowing past 2 or 3 weeks where Israel has ramped up a campaign against Lebanon. First, we saw a terrorist attack against the Lebanese population with pagers. They rigged pagers, beepers to explode, and many thousands were injured because of this, and some were killed as well. Of course, Israel and its puppy dog, the U.S., claimed that this was only targeting Hezbollah. But reports came out that actually most of the injuries and fatalities were just from normal civilians, because the pagers were used by doctors, nurses, service workers, etc. And of course, when you're holding an electronic device, you're going to the market, or you're going to work, or you're at the hospital, or you're in the car with your family. If that goes off, then there's going to be a lot of civilians also killed. And you had even a former CIA director, Leon Panetta, who said that this is a clear act of terrorism. There is no doubt that this is terrorism, international terrorism, that Israel has committed according to international law. International law specifically outlaws booby-trapping devices, booby-trapping products, and sending them to a population. This is explicitly prohibited by international law, but Israel did it anyway. And as the former CIA director said, this opens a entirely new chapter in international terrorism. This opens up an entire door of potential horrors that can be committed, because any supply chain can be hacked. Any kind of consumer supply chain can be hacked by state or non-state actors, and explosives implanted and then triggered. So this is a very terrifying situation that has been created because of Israel and Israeli terror. So then you had these heavy strikes of Beirut, entire city blocks with residential blocks with these towers, apartment buildings that were hit and blasted over the course of many days to terrorize the Lebanese population further. And this culminated with a strike in Beirut that ended up killing Hassan Nasrallah, who is the leader of Hezbollah. And they had to basically level an entire block. They destroyed, completely obliterated several apartment buildings with hundreds of civilian residents. And this was just to target one man. So again, this is at least a war crime, if not international terrorism. But of course, Israel does not care. Israel does not care how many Muslims it kills. It slaughters basically en masse, as long as their strategic objectives are met. So this is a rogue state that doesn't care about international law. More specifically, as far as Muslims are concerned, because Muslims know that the anti-Muslim forces of the world, they rarely care about international norms. The U.S. does not care about international norms as far as it comes to killing Muslims. We've known this. We've seen this history. What is more concerning is that even basic human conscience, even basic human limitations on death, destruction, killing, slaughter of women and children, these things seem to have no relevance. They seem to play no influence on the Israeli war campaign. That's the shocking thing. That is the scary thing. And it's not even, they're not even worried about being embarrassed anymore. They're not even worried about their name coming into disrepute. They have recognized that they're never going to get their reputation back. They're never going to be seen as a respectable world power. So they're fine with being the villain. They're fine with being criticized and chastised for the atrocities that they commit, for the war crimes that they commit. That's scary. That's scary because there's no more limits. There's no more brakes on the train. They're going to feel free to commit even more atrocities. What we have seen in Gaza over the past year, that's just a taste, unfortunately, for what they plan to do to Muslims throughout the Muslim world. And it doesn't matter if those Muslims are on their borders or even far away. They will engage in all kinds of terrorism against Muslims for their strategic aims, for their interests. So this is the situation that we're going to react to and respond to because there's a lot of confusion, unfortunately. There's a lot of confusion that Muslims have, and this has become apparent on social media. And I've been personally attacked, as always. You know, I'm always being attacked. Some of it by the usual suspects, some by other factions. So we're going to talk about that. You know, how should Muslims react to the death of Hassan Nasrallah? How should Muslims react to the weakening or potential destruction of Hezbollah? What are the consequences that are going to come if Hezbollah is defeated, if Iran is defeated? What are the wider consequences of that? And a lot of people don't seem to understand. How does this relate to end times and Masih ad-Dajjal, the Antichrist? How does that come into play? Because it's also relevant. What has happened in the past 2 days is relevant to the coming of the Antichrist. We are going to talk about that, inshallah. So I hope you stay for the entirety of the episode, and a reminder to subscribe, as always, to our newsletter, to the channel, of course. But if you subscribe to the newsletter, the link is below in the description. If for some reason YouTube decides that we can't talk about the Antichrist, we can't talk about DAJJAL, we can't talk about the new Middle East that is being created as we speak, with Israel now on the border of Lebanon, about to start the ground invasion, we can't talk about that. We need to stay in touch with you. And the only way we can stay in touch with you, bi'ithnillah, is through an email address. So give us your email address. It's safe. It's an amana with us, and we will send you a newsletter. We haven't been sending a newsletter, so I know some people have signed up and they're asking, well, I haven't gotten a newsletter. I haven't gotten an email. Don't worry, we haven't been sending. That's the thing. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to send emails every day. It's very rarely. You know, ideally we want to get to a point where once a month or twice a month or 3 times a month, we're emailing you good information that you can't get on the channels or on social media, so that incentivizes you to subscribe, inshallah. Those are coming. Those are coming. So please subscribe. And also, I'm looking at the super chat. So if you want me to read your super chat or your chat, I'll do so periodically, as long as it's relevant, as long as it's not inflammatory. I will read it, inshallah. So just because you submit it and I don't read it immediately, that doesn't mean I'm not going to see it or address it, inshallah, as long as it's relevant. Okay, so let us begin. You have the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. You also have many of the leaders of Hezbollah being liquidated. So you had people celebrating this. You had Muslims celebrating this and very happy and overjoyed about this. And I said that this is foolish. This is foolish because you haven't thought through the consequences of a defeat of Hezbollah and a defeat of Iran. The consequences are quite dire. They're quite dire. And I'm going to explain what those consequences are. Has Hezbollah committed crimes and atrocities against Sunni Muslims in Syria and elsewhere? Yes, yes, they have. Horrific crimes. They have conducted these crimes in Syria. Has Iran committed crimes against Sunnis in Syria, in Iraq, and elsewhere? Yes, they have. And I condemn them for that. And I have been very clear on this. I have been crystal clear on this, in fact. And I, in fact, ratioed the supreme leader of Iran on Twitter. I ratioed Khamenei on Twitter. And here, I'll show you the tweet. Just give me 1 second. And I'll show you the tweet where I'm ratioing the supreme leader. And let me show you. Okay, so here's what Khamenei said, the supreme leader of Iran, saying the concept of an Islamic Ummah must never be forgotten. Protecting the identity of the Islamic Ummah is essential. It's a fundamental issue that transcends nationality and geographical borders. Don't change the reality and identity of the Islamic Ummah. Yeah, those are nice terms, but how about stop killing Muslims in Syria and Iraq? Very simple. Condemnation, and this is a ratio. At one point it was a ratio in terms of the likes, but right now as it stands it's a ratio in terms of views. Somehow my reply tweet, this rarely ever happens, has more views than the actual supreme leader, Khamenei. Okay, so this is how can you argue that or question where my loyalties lie? That's my question for these critics, because I don't see them criticizing their rulers. I don't see them criticizing or making direct condemnations or direct replies to their rulers that either they are supporting actively like the Madkhalis, or they're indifferent to and they don't comment on like some of these other Sunni or Salafi groups. I don't see you making a peep about some of these rulers in the Gulf at all. In fact, if you're not pledging your allegiance to them and supporting them and calling anyone who criticizes them Khawarij, if you're not in that Madkhali camp, you're silent. You're silent, despite the fact that these leaders are killing Muslims in Sudan, in Yemen, throughout the world. They are also engaged in these kinds of behaviors against the Ummah. But you don't have any criticisms for that. You only have criticisms for Iran. I'm at least consistent. And that's the difference between me and these critics. They have zero consistency, and therefore they have zero credibility. They have zero credibility. Now, you might say, oh, well, Daniel, this is something that doesn't really mean anything. Okay, it doesn't mean anything to you, but it means something to people who can see what's obvious in front of their eyes. And what's obvious in front of people's eyes is that how many leaders are there in the world that will oppose Israel? They'll actually oppose Israel and put pressure on them and retaliate for the genocide that they're committing against Palestinians. How many leaders are there? I want to know the number, because it's just a handful. It's just a handful. And one of them was just killed 2 days ago. Nasrallah was killed 2 days ago, and it's up in the air what's going to happen next. If Iran is also taken out, or Iranian opposition to Israel is neutralized and they install a puppet, then, like they've done in all of these other Arab states, then who's going to stop Israel from genociding more and more and more and more? How much Muslim blood is going to spill? So no matter how much you condemn Iran, you criticize Hezbollah for their crimes against Sunnis, against Syrians. No matter how much you do that, you have to recognize the reality. The reality is that there aren't I wish there was an army of Muslim leaders in the world who are going to actually put their money where their mouths are and take action to protect innocent Muslim life. I wish, there's an army, but unfortunately, it's slim pickings. It's a very small group, and it's getting smaller every day. And this has been Israeli policy. And we put a video out on this, that even from the beginning of the Israel, even prior to the founding of Israel, in 1947-48, they have been conspiring. Zionism has been conspiring to weaken and fracture first the Ottoman Caliphate and then the rest of the Muslim world. And they have assassinated Muslim leaders. Any Muslim leader that comes and shows any kind of opposition to Israel and its goals to occupy the Palestinian land, expel Palestinians, any Muslim leader who does that, they will assassinate, they will displace, they will generate coups or civil wars to displace. It has happened over and over and over and over again. Starting from King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. He was taken out. He was assassinated. You have within Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, before the Iranian Revolution. He was also someone that was targeted by the Zionists. You had Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq of Pakistan. He was a ruler, or he was a leader of Pakistan that was starting to bring tough talk against Israel and saying things like, we need to get the nuclear weapon so that we can share with other Muslim countries. He died in a plane crash. That was very suspicious, very suspicious. And then, we are hearing recently of many Iranian officials and the former president Raisi dying in a helicopter crash. It's strange how all of these opponents of Israel, all of these presidents and leaders who have said anything against Israel, they just have really bad luck when it comes to flying, I guess. You have the founder of Hamas, Ahmed Yassin. You have Yasser Arafat, another Palestinian. Arguably Mossad involved with assassinating him. You have Saddam Hussein. You have Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi as well made many statements in favor of unifying the Arab states against the Zionist entity. Why? Because he understood the threat to Arabs and Muslims. Guess what? He's taken out. He's taken out. Mohammed Morsi, anyone who has any kind of connection to Ikhwan, taken out. And now Hassan Nasrallah. So who else is going to be left when the remainder of Hezbollah is taken out, when Iran is taken out, and then eventually how is Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, how are they going to be able to withstand Israel's incursion? That's the question I want people to answer. So if you are happy and celebrating, you think this is great, I don't understand. Like you can be against, or you can recognize the crimes of these groups like Hezbollah against Sunnis and still be very sober and concerned and worried about the situation that is unfolding before our eyes, and recognize that this is a disaster. And I'm going to give you the consequences that we're going to face. And then, there's 4 or 5 points here, or more than 5 points. And then I want to address some of the criticisms, because people say, oh, Daniel, you're just ignorant. You don't know about what's been happening in Syria. You don't know about basic Quran, because the Quran also said that the Muslims would rejoice when the Romans defeat the Persians. This is in Surah Rum. Daniel is ignorant of the Quran. So we're going to address all of these points in this live stream, inshallah. So let's pause for a second to look at your super chats, and then we'll continue, inshallah. Okay, Suf, I don't know how to say this name. Thank you for your super chat. Wario, appreciate your super chat. Let's get the channel to 500k subs. Appreciate you, brother. Danny says, how long before the common folk finally get fed up with the incompetence of the Muslim leaders? Good question. Let's see. It's disappointing to see Jake criticizing you, saying he won't team up with you for debates just because of this. Oh, it's just because of this that he won't team up with me? I think there's more to the story. There's more to the story. So, yeah, it is disappointing, but what can you expect from certain people? Let's see. Alhamdulillah, I just got your book, The Modernist Menace to Islam, and can't wait to read it. My question is, what is your opinion on how the Jewish religion deviated so much to this point from Wahi? Well, thank you for getting the book. Hopefully you will appreciate it and enjoy it. How have they deviated? I mean, this is the nature of humanity, that Allah sends revelation. Even prior to the Jewish religion as such, Allah sends revelation. He sends books and he sends anbiya. And then some people obey, the majority reject. And then that message over time gets corrupted. People deviate. They follow their desires. They start worshiping other than Allah. And it's a step-by-step process. That's how you get something like the Jewish religion or the Christian religion, or you get Hinduism, or you get all of these other religions in the world. It's a very similar pattern over and over again. This is why it's so important for Muslims to stay strong in preserving the Quran and Sunnah and applying it and not distorting and deviating and reforming. Okay, let's see. Yeah, here's a low IQ comment. You ratio the Ayatollah. Therefore, let's normalize with Assad and ignore the fact that Iran has been suppressing Sunnis for years. Got it. Yeah, so this is the kind of level of response that we can expect, like from these types of people. Again, so this is not necessarily a madkhali. Maybe he is. I don't know. But again, who said normalize with Assad? Who said normalize or just have a good relationship? Do you know what the concept of a ceasefire? Do you know the concept of an agreement to cease hostilities? Do you know, do these concepts have any meaning for you? They apparently have a meaning when it comes to the U.S., and apparently they have a meaning for you when it comes to some of these Gulf states. Apparently has a meaning for you for any country in the world. Yeah, we should have agreements. We should have non-aggression treaties. We should work with them. It makes sense for every single nation in the world except for two, except for Iran and for Syria or Assad. Why? Why? Do those other countries not have crimes? Did Saudi not exterminate countless Yemeni Muslims through famine? Wasn't that Saudi who did that with the help of the UAE? Wasn't it the UAE right now that's committing atrocities against our Sudanese Muslims, Muslim brothers and sisters? You have no problem with those groups or those countries, and you don't have a principled stand against them. Why? Why? I want to know, like, what makes these countries different than or different from Iran or Assad? They all have, like, in the list of rulers that I mentioned that Israel has assassinated, they all have problems. They all have deviance, deviated positions. They all have blood on their hands. Not all. Most have blood on their hands. So look at the blood on Saddam Hussein's hands. How many Shia did Saddam kill? Or how many religious Sunnis did he kill? How many religious scholars did they put in prison? So they all have problems. That's not the point. The point is not that they're perfect, that they're amazing, ideal rulers, or that they're heroes, or that they're... But that's the nature of realpolitik. That's the nature of allying with groups in order to avoid a much greater harm. That's the point, a much greater harm. You can look at what any of these rulers have done. Assad, Khamenei, you can look at Saddam, you can look at Gaddafi, you can look at any of these figures historically. There is nothing comparable in terms of death and destruction and war against Islam than what Israel has done in its short history. And no one is able to prove it. People just talk, out of their rear. They just make stuff up. They say, oh, Assad has killed millions. Really? He killed millions? He's killed tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. Israel has killed hundreds of thousands in 9 months, in 10 months. And not including all of these other wars that Israel has and neocon Zionists have pushed the U.S. to do in the past 20 years. So there's no comparison. There's absolutely no comparison, not to mention the global agenda to reform Islam. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Responding to really stupid comments here. The way majority of the Sunni Muslims talk about Shia is very dangerous, as many are unaware that Shias are a mixed bag, some good, some bad. Yeah, they are a mixed bag. That's the thing. They're a mixed bag in terms of their beliefs. They're highly diverse in terms of their beliefs and their practices, and you can't group them all into one category. And that's why it's incorrect to do mass takfir of Shia. Not all Shia should be considered kuffar. And this is the majority position of Sunni ulama throughout history. And people such as Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah had this position that not all the Shia are kuffar. They're Ahlul Bid'ah. They are considered deviant, but they're not kuffar. And some of them might fall into kufr and be considered kafir. It depends. It depends on what their actual beliefs are. If you believe that the Quran has been distorted, then and has been changed, and the Mus'haf that we read today is not what has been revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is the kind of kufr that takes you out of Islam. Now, what percentage of Shia actually believe that? 1%, 2%. It's a very small number. Historically, you had much larger numbers of Shia that believe that, but that belief has gone to the wayside. It's no longer a standard belief amongst the Shia, despite what you might read in the books. The thing is that the kind of textual relationship that Sunnis have with their tradition is not analogous to the relationship that Shia have with their books. Shia do not have this kind of close connection to their books, and they don't read and study and memorize them and transmit them in the way that Sunnis do. That's actually part of the reason that they become so diverse and deviated, and they evolve over time. So just because you can point something out in a book, that doesn't mean that all Shia, or even a majority, or even a sizable margin of Shia actually believe that. So it's a mistake to do mass takfir of the Shia. It has to be done on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the actual beliefs of those individuals are. Okay, so now let me get to the more of the meat of what we're talking about, because people do not understand the consequences of eliminating Hezbollah. For Israel to eliminate Hezbollah and to neutralize or do regime change in Iran, then you have no more major Muslim powers that are opposing Israel. That's what happens. So then what are the consequences of that? So I'm going to go through the list. The first major thing that you need to consider is the fact that what Israel has done in the past 2 weeks, culminating in the elimination of Nasrallah and now on the verge of a ground invasion with Lebanon, is that it consolidates or unites the left-wing and the right-wing Jews behind Netanyahu. This is extremely significant because there has been a rift. And you see this with the protests that have been happening in Tel Aviv, for example, is that you have a faction of more liberal left-wing Jews who are not happy with Netanyahu and the more right-wing Likud and the more right-wing parties that are allied with Likud, as represented by ministers like Ben Gvir. So the left-wing Jews are not happy with the invasion of Gaza. They're not happy with this belligerence. But with the success of this operation, first with the pagers and then with the bombardment of Beirut and then the killing of Nasrallah, Netanyahu has made a strong case for his methods being effective. He's proved that brute force works. Brute force gets results. We can, look at what we've done over the past 2 weeks to Lebanon. Where was the backlash? Yeah, you have some backlash from people commenting internationally. So what? So what? We've already done that kind of damage to our reputation because of what we've done to Gaza. And now we've extended that outside of our borders, doing it to Lebanon, and there hasn't been any meaningful difference. There hasn't been any meaningful difference, and there hasn't been any deterrence. We've basically called Iran's bluff. Iran did not attack. We didn't see any significant consequence. Therefore, brute force works. Being bold works. This is the right-wing strategy of Netanyahu and the strategy of the most extreme elements within Israeli society. And what they've now done is they've convinced the left-wing side, which are mostly in the West, like in the US and Europe, they've convinced that, okay, maybe there's something there. Maybe Netanyahu has a point. Maybe we need to get more behind his strategy. So what that means is that we're going to see a lot more of this. We're going to see a lot more brute force, a lot more bombardments and bombings. And that's why we see now Syria, now they're striking Syria more directly. And they're saying one of the relatives of Assad, Bashar al-Assad, has been assassinated. A bomb hit his complex. Yemen, the seaport, is now being bombarded. Not to mention Lebanon. So these are all now, everything is escalating because Netanyahu has convinced a larger coalition of Jews across the world that his strategy is effective. And that's part of what the permission that he was getting, actually, when he came to the U.S. and he gave the speech to Congress. Part of that was getting permission to go full force, to engage in the pager attack, to engage in the bombardment of Lebanon. And he got that permission, and now he can go back and say, see, it worked. We took out the leader of Hezbollah. And you have Biden and the White House praising it, saying great job, even though hundreds of civilians were murdered by this operation, not to mention the pager operation. So we're going to see more and more and more. They're going to export this strategy to the rest of the Muslim world. And then you had Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner, who is Trump's son-in-law, he had a very shocking post that confirms all this. Let me show you that. On Twitter, and he rarely tweets anything, but even he came out and he said September 27th is the most important day in the Middle East since the Abrahamic Accords breakthrough. I have spent countless hours studying Hezbollah, and there's not an expert on earth who thought that what Israel has done to decapitate and degrade them was possible. So when he says experts, he's mainly referring to Jewish neocons, other Zionists. They didn't think it was possible that this could happen, but Netanyahu pulled it off. So that's going to pull them to Netanyahu's side. This is significant because Iran is now fully exposed, meaning Israel is going to be much more likely to start bombarding Iran directly. The reason why their nuclear facilities have not been destroyed despite weak air defense system is because Hezbollah has been a loaded gun pointed at Israel. Iran spent the last 40 years building this capability as its deterrent. President Trump would often say, Iran has never won a war but never lost a negotiation. The Islamic Republic's regime is much tougher when risking Hamas, Hezbollah, Syrian, and Houthi lives than when risking their own. Their foolish efforts to assassinate President Trump and hack his campaign reek of desperation and are hardening a large coalition against them. Iranian leadership is stuck in the old Middle East, while their neighbors in the GCC, meaning the Gulf, are sprinting toward the future. By investing in their populations and infrastructure, they're becoming dynamic magnets for talent and investment, while Iran falls further behind. As the Iranian proxies and threats dissipate, regional security and prosperity will rise for Christians, Muslims, and Jews alike. Israel now finds itself with the threat from Gaza mostly neutralized and the opportunity to neutralize Hezbollah in the north. It's unfortunate how we got here, but maybe there can be a silver lining in the end. What's unfortunate means like October 7th, probably. Anyone who has been calling for a ceasefire in the north is wrong. There's no going back for Israel. They cannot afford now not to finish the job and completely dismantle the arsenal that has been aimed at them. They will never get another chance. After the brilliant rapid-fire tactical successes of the pagers, radios, and targeting of leadership, Hezbollah's massive weapons cache is unguarded and unmanned. Most of Hezbollah fighters are hiding in tunnels. Anyone still around was not important enough to carry a pager or be invited to a leadership meeting. Iran is reeling as well, insecure and unsure how deeply its own intelligence has been penetrated. Failing to take full advantage of this opportunity to neutralize the threat is irresponsible. I've been hearing some amazing stories about how Israel has been collecting intelligence over the past 10 months with some brilliant tech and crowdsourcing, but today, with the confirmed killing of Nasrallah and at least 16 top commanders eliminated in just 9 days, was the first day I started thinking about a Middle East without Iran's fully loaded arsenal aimed at Israel. So many more positive outcomes are possible. This is a moment to stand behind the peace-seeking nation of Israel and the large portion of the Lebanese who have been plagued by Hezbollah and who want to return to the times when their country was thriving and Beirut a cosmopolitan city. The main issue between Lebanon and Israel is Iran. Otherwise, there's a lot of benefit for the people of both countries from working together. The right move now for America would be to tell Israel to finish the job. It's long overdue, and it's not only Israel's fight. More than 40 years ago, Hezbollah killed 241 U.S. military personnel, including 220 Marines. That remains the single deadliest day for the U.S. Marine Corps since the Battle of Iwo Jima. Later that same day, Hezbollah killed 58 French paratroopers. This is a lie, by the way. Hezbollah wasn't founded for over 40 years ago when he's talking about. Hezbollah wasn't even there around. This is a lie that Israel keeps propagating, but has no factual basis. And of course, there's no community notes on this. So Twitter only community notes you if you're against Israel. And now for the past 6 weeks or so, Israel has eliminated as many terrorists on the U.S. list of wanted terrorists as the U.S. has done in the last 20 years. So look, this is what they're saying. Like, we can do in 6 weeks what it took you 20 years to do. So our methods are more effective. We need to keep doing this. So, I mean, how could it be any clearer? You know, what they're signaling for the future. And the thing is that they want to do this ground invasion. They are getting on the border. They want to finish the job, as Kushner is saying. But it's going to be the same slog, the same quagmire that they are facing in Gaza, if not worse. Because unlike Gaza, the terrain in Lebanon is much more difficult to navigate. It's more mountainous, it's more rocky. So that puts them at a disadvantage because the heavy arms can't be transported. The tanks can't really maneuver as effectively in Lebanon, headed to Beirut as it has been in Gaza. But we know what Israel does when it's frustrated with ground operations. What Israel does when it's frustrated is it starts bombing more heavily. What do you think that means for Beirut? What do you think that means for the rest of Lebanon? Like, this is going to be a repetition of Gaza. And the only group that is able to and has a track record of holding them back is who? It's Hezbollah. So by recognizing that means you are secret Shia operator and you secretly hate Syrians. You just love to see Syrian children being killed. Like, if that's what it means, then everyone has to be that. Everyone has to be that, because that's the manifest truth of the situation. That's the obvious truth. So, I mean, the problem, unfortunately, with a lot of people is just an emotional reaction. Like, you just have an emotional reaction and you don't move beyond the emotion. It's fine to have an emotional reaction in the immediacy of the moment. But then once the reaction is over, you have to be sober and calculate and see what is behind, what other things are there. What is the situation look like now? How should we act? How should we strategize? How should we think? How should we assess and evaluate? Emotion, okay, that's, unless you're, a certain gender, then the emotion is just the immediate thing. Then after a day, after 2 days, after 3 days, you sober up and you assess and you realize what's going on. But unfortunately, we have a lot of estrogen-addled brains. And they don't understand, like, they don't see anything beyond Hezbollah has killed Sunnis. Yes, we know. Despicable, condemnable, horrific. Now what? No, but they'll never let you get beyond that. They'll never let you get beyond that to see what the future reality is. I mean, this is one of the big problems that the Ummah has faced even from the beginning. Even from the beginning, you have the earliest Muslims that were still bitter over tribal disagreements that they had in the times of Jahiliyyah. In the times of Jahiliyyah, you had these different tribes in Mecca and Medina, and they were blood feuding. They were killing each other and committing atrocities against each other. And then the Prophet ﷺ comes and says, to be united or to ally, this is needed. We have to put this past behind us. And then some said, no, we can never let this go. We can never let go what was done in the past. And that attitude was condemned as Jahiliyyah. Same situation between Pakistan and Bangladesh. You have people in Bangladesh saying that we can never forgive what Pakistan did 50 years ago. We can never forgive that. There were millions killed. That's an exaggerated number. There were hundreds of thousands of women raped. We can never forgive that. That mentality of we can never forgive is going to lead to the destruction of everything. It is going to allow India to come in and destroy everything because you're not able to at least ally, if not unite. So the enemies of Islam are very aware that this is how you get Muslims to remain divided, and they will kill each other. Instead of facing you, they will kill each other. You just have to bring up the past, and you have to inflame, you have to goad them into more and more attacks of each other. So that's what the pattern is playing out again. And when you point it out and you say that, hey guys, there's a dire situation here. Beirut is about to be flattened. And then Damascus is next. They say, no, we can't forget. Okay, don't forget. Don't forget. You don't have to forget. You don't have to forget, but at least take the actions necessary to preserve and to protect. What's the bigger threat? Like, come on. Okay, look at this article. So now they're just openly saying, is Lebanon part of Israel's promised territory? They're now openly talking about annexation of Lebanon, the entire country. This was published in the Jerusalem Post. So let me read this, because now they've deleted this article. They published this. As soon as Nasrallah was assassinated, they published this article. And they always say, oh, the greater Israel, that's a conspiracy theory. Oh, Israel has no interest in annexing other territories. Oh, this is just conspiracy. But they're openly publishing it. And when the timing is significant, they published it when? Right as soon as Hezbollah gets decapitated. So then what does this article say? The Torah verses convey profound messages that we can insightfully extract for our daily lives. Rabbi Shea Tahan, the Rosh Kollel of Sharei Ezra in Brooklyn, New York, graciously opens the gates to understand them. The recent conflict in Lebanon raises the age-old question regarding the northern borders of biblical Eretz Yisrael, meaning Greater Israel. Where exactly did God define the boundaries, and are we obligated to conquer those areas? Do the mitzvot of terumah, meaning the commandments, and maser apply to those lands as part of Greater Israel, or are they considered outside the borders? The Torah provides clear guidelines regarding the areas we were commanded to conquer when taking possession of the land. In the last generation, the term Greater Israel has come to the forefront. It's sometimes used in political or religious discussions about the ideal or future borders of Israel, often in the context of Messianic or Zionist aspirations. Some interpret it as a call for the reestablishment of Israel's biblical borders. However, the concept varies in meaning, ranging from symbolic or spiritual interpretations to literal geographic claims. This term refers to the concept of the biblical boundaries of the land of Israel as promised to the Jewish people in various parts of the Torah. It is often associated with the land described in the covenant of Abraham, which stretches from the river of Egypt, interpreted by some as the Nile, or a smaller river in the Sinai, to the Perat River, meaning Euphrates. This expansive region includes parts of modern-day Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Iraq. And see, they're lying here. The author is lying because it also includes parts of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Sinai. It includes the Sinai. It includes parts of northern Saudi. And also parts of Turkey, southern parts of Turkey. But he doesn't mention that. Why? Because they're trying to normalize relations. See how deceptive. They're trying to normalize with Saudi. When God promised Avraham, Avinu, the land of Israel, the Pasuk says, on that day, Hashem made a covenant with Avram, saying, to your descendants, I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates. At the blessing at the end of Parshat Ekev, Hashem tells us that we are granted every land we will conquer within the borders mentioned. In the north, the Torah states, every place where the sole of your foot will tread shall be yours, from the wilderness and the Lebanon, from the river, the Euphrates, until the western sea shall be your boundary. The promise from the Creator clearly places the land of Lebanon within the promised land of Israel, or what some refer to as the complete land of Israel, or Greater Israel. The Rambam, meaning Maimonides, wrote that their great rabbi, that Lebanon is within the borders of Israel, and adds that we were obligated and commanded to conquer it. Oh, you were, okay. No, he's saying that it's a positive commandment. It's a positive mitzvah to conquer these lands. Sefer Yehoshua begins with Hashem speaking to Yehoshua and repeating the above command. Every place your foot will step has been given to you as I spoke to Moses from the desert and Lebanon until the great river, the Euphrates. The tribe of Asher is mainly associated with regions that include parts of Lebanon. Following the conquest of the land under Yehoshua, the tribes established their territories, with Asher extending into areas adjacent to Lebanon. The text describes the border of the tribe of Asher, detailing sections of borders and lists of cities, some of which are border cities that mark the tribe's boundary. Within the inheritance of the tribe of Asher lies the valley of Akko, north of Mount Carmel, with its northernmost point in the city of Sidon. The extension of the land of Israel to include additional territories, such as the concept of Greater Israel, has several political halachic implications. These mainly revolve around commandments that are tied specifically to the land, known as mitzvot hataluyot baretz. Mitzvot meaning mitzvot depending on the land. Commandments that are specific to the land. Some key halachic implications include, so this is like the Judaic law. Mitzvot dependent on the land. Certain agricultural commandments apply only in the land of Israel. This includes things like Shemitah, where the land must rest every 7 years. Terumot and Maserot, tithes given to the Kohanim, Levites, and the poor. So this is a kind of like Kohanim are like the priestly classes. Levites are the priestly classes, so they get like a certain charity, tithes, tax. It's similar to the caste system in Hinduism. the prohibition of eating fruits from trees during the first 3 years of their growth. Expanding Israel's borders would mean extending the requirement to observe these mitzvot in the newly included territories. So this is what they're doing. They're thinking about how are we going to apply our religious law as we conquer Lebanon. So they openly talking about settlement in accordance with the Bible, wars and conquest. The concept of milchemet mitzvah, a commanded war, includes conquering certain territories that were promised in the Torah. If new land is identified as part of the biblical borders, there may be halachic discussions about the obligation to conquer and settle it. So this again is deceptive because they already know what the lands of Greater Israel are. The ministers are wearing, or they're holding up. Netanyahu at the UN held up a chart that showed the borders of Greater Israel. They know what the borders are, and it includes all those countries that I mentioned, including Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So this is not an ongoing discussion. And it's interesting, he mentions milchemet mitzvah. That means commanded war. There's also voluntary war, milchemet reshut. These are they're not obligatory in the same way, and there are differences because with milchemet mitzvah, you have to cleanse the land completely. So that's ethnic cleansing or genocide. Milchemet reshut, like a voluntary war, the Bible gives Jews the ability to conquer the entire globe. And not necessarily massacre every non-Jew, but you just keep them under control and they're your slaves. That's milchemet reshut. That's part of Jewish war theory. And then people think that, this is not possible. How can such a small country like Israel with just 10 million people, they're going to conquer the world? Like, this is nonsense. It's not so far-fetched. And you don't have to engage in conspiracy theories. You just have to, simply understand now with the improvements in technology, the improvements of AI, you can have an army of bots. You can have an army of bots using AI that dominate social media, that can dominate the world, the global media. That's not outside of the realm of possibility. So forget about conquering the rest of the Middle East, conquering Lebanon, conquering Syria, annexing all of these territories. We're talking about a much bigger operation. And this is relevant. This is very relevant to DAJJAL. This is very relevant to the kinds of horrors and fitna that comes with Masih DAJJAL, the Antichrist. What is one of the main things that DAJJAL is able to do? Like, he has certain powers that seem miraculous. He has certain capabilities that seem supernatural. And now the kind of technology that is being developed is going to reach a point where it's indistinguishable, or it seems very supernatural. It seems like magic. That's within the possibility, within the near future. So again, and then the whole process of taking land, annexing, as this article, okay, this article is in the Jerusalem Post, by the way. This is not like some random blog. This is from the Jerusalem Post, one of the top Israeli media outlets in the English language. And he's just laying it all out there, and then they delete the article. They delete it because it was getting too much backlash. So they ended up deleting it. Again, showing the deceptive nature of what they're doing. And now they're on the verge of occupying Lebanon. So I don't want to be black-pilled fully and say that, yeah, it's going to be a cakewalk. Israel's just going to annex Lebanon. But the fact is there that it's going to be extremely destructive. It's going to be devastating. If Gaza is any indication, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of Muslims that are going to be slaughtered. Because they don't have any more boundaries. They don't have any more, there's no more deterrence. The Hague, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, they've already made their declarations. They've already condemned. No deterrence at all. The only thing that Israel was worried about was Iranian retaliation using some of these missiles, and Iran has done nothing. Iran allowed Ismail Haniyeh to be assassinated within their own borders. No response. Nasrallah taken out. Beirut is being bombarded. Where's the response? So you can be hopeful that maybe there's something happening. Maybe Russia is involved. Maybe there will be a some kind of deterrence, but every day that becomes less and less likely. So I don't want to be black-pilled. I don't want to be, but what we just have to read the cards. Just read the writing on the wall. Like what is going to prevent this kind of occupation? And again, we know Israel's history. Like the way that they operate is that they occupy a territory, then settlers move in. There's a military occupation. Then settlers move in after that initial Nakba, that initial massacre. Then the settlers move in. Then the settlers continue terrorism for decades. Then, you know, the remaining Arabs are kicked out and they're ethnically cleansed. That we're seeing that happening in Gaza. And now it's happening in the West Bank. The West Bank is also being cleared. Who's going to be next? Who's going to be next for this process? It might take a period of time. It might take a generation, but that's their goal. They want to be this empire of the Middle East and extend their control across the rest of the world. They know that the U.S. is on its way out. So now is the time. Now is the opportunity to consolidate control and establish yourself as the undisputed regional superpower. And then look at birth rates. Like, are you aware that the birth rates in all of these Middle Eastern countries are declining, except for one? Like, does that mean anything? Like, look at this. This is from this research article online. And they have the fertility rate in select Arab countries from 1980 to 2025. They're all dropping precipitously. What's causing that? Feminism. Feminism is the big cause. Industrialization is the big cause. Iran is another one that's not on this list. It's taking the fertility rate nosedive. Meanwhile, what are they doing in Israel? Oh, for the first time, Haaretz is reporting, first time in Israel's history, fertility rate surpasses that of Arabs. Arab women had higher fertility rate than Jews in Israel for years, but data reported by the Central Bureau of Statistics points to a change. So what does that mean? That means they need more land. See, here's the chart. Arabs have been going down consistently, but when it comes to Israeli Jews, no, it's steadily increasing. They'll need more land, right? That's the whole, that it's not even like a new playbook. It's the same playbook again and again and again. And then people just keep falling for it. So it's not just about annexing Lebanon and Syria, expanding into Jordan, expanding into the Sinai and beyond the Sinai. By the way, it's basically everything east of the Nile. No, it's not going to stop there. Guess what? Masjid al-Aqsa. Masjid al-Aqsa is extremely exposed now, very vulnerable right now. Who's going to stop? The way that Israel operates is not like the IDF is going to go and start bulldozing Masjid al-Aqsa. They can't do that yet. Instead, it's going to be Abrahamic religion. The first step is normalizing with Saudi. That's the last piece of the puzzle. They've already normalized with all of these other Arab countries. We just need to normalize with Saudi. Then they've already laid the groundwork for the Abrahamic religion. You think that when they're doing like this kind of masjid, synagogue, church complex in Dubai, like that's what they really are aiming for? That's really their concern? No. Their main concern is the next piece of taking over Masjid al-Aqsa and building the third temple. Which is, okay, well, we're all one Abrahamic religion, so you have your Masjid al-Aqsa on the Temple Mount, as they call it. Well, we should also have a church and a synagogue there. That's what tolerance and Abrahamic unity are about. This is our shared holy site. So we need to have a church and a synagogue, or at least let our Jewish worshipers go there on a regular basis and have their place. Maybe we won't call it a synagogue. Maybe that's too extreme. So that's the second step after Saudi normalization. They're going to push for that and they're going to get it. Why? Because there's no deterrent factor anymore. If, assuming that Hezbollah has been neutralized or eliminated and Iran has been neutralized. So then the synagogue goes up, or the prayer space, or whatever, the Abrahamic unity house is established on Masjid al-Aqsa. And then that's the next step, bulldozing everything else, and then constructing the third temple. That's the step-by-step, right? Because they won't be able to do all of that until they make sure that their allies, these puppet regimes, are fully secured. And how do you fully secure these puppet regimes? Well, you have to normalize first, and then you're going to bring in military bases. More military bases to control these populations, controlled by Israel. That's part of the normalization process. So, and we already have people like Muslim scholars signaling this, by the way. If you go to Hamza Yusuf, he had that interview. And I won't play the audio, but you can go to my Twitter. Hamza Yusuf says a part of Masjid al-Aqsa should be given to Jews to build a temple. He said it himself. That this is part of the agenda, the Abrahamic unity religion. Part of the Temple Mount, as he calls it, needs to be, it can be shared. Why not? Why can't we share? It's so meaningful and important to all the religions, Christians, Jews, Muslims. Let's all share. That's beautiful tolerance. That's coming. He's signaling it. This was from many months ago. But he says only extremists would oppose this. So he's kind of signaling it's Muslim extremists or Jewish extremists who oppose this. The Muslim extremists say, oh, we want just Masjid al-Aqsa. You can't destroy our third most holy site. And the Jewish extremist says, no, we can't have these Muslims there. We can't have Masjid al-Aqsa. We need to take it over completely. These are the extremists. And then the moderate Israeli government says, no, we want this to be an international location for the Abrahamic religions. And so they build the synagogue and they build the church. They replicate the Abrahamic house that has been established in Dubai. Maybe they'll even have some Hindus. Who knows? Who knows? But that's a stretch because for obvious reasons. But that's the plan. That's the plan. Now you know. So continuing, you think that it's only Masjid al-Aqsa, by the way, that's going to face this? No, guess what? Haramain, Mecca and Medina also implicated. Why? That's what Saudi normalization does. Saudi normalization means what? It means that government is even more occupied. They become even more of a occupied government. And they control who can come in and out. That's already the case, by the way. They already can control who can come in and out to do Hajj or to do Umrah. That's going to be taken to a next level. So if you have said anything against Zionism, anything against Israel online, don't think that you'll be able to do Umrah. Don't think that you're going to be able to do Hajj. Cancel your plans. Cancel your tickets. Do not see this. Do not understand what's happening. if you have said anything, even if you said, at a certain point, they're going to say, if you said anything in support of Palestinians, if you've said anything in support of the Lebanese, if you've said anything to support them, you're an extremist. We can't let you do Hajj. We can't let you do Umrah. You think that's not possible? You don't think that that's what they want to do? You don't think that they know that this is the nerve that is going to be able to control the Muslim masses across the globe? How can we silence all of these activist Muslims and all of these anti-Zionist Muslims that are agitating against Israel? How can we silence them once and for all? Okay, guess what? You've said anything in the past 10 years against Israel, forget about doing Hajj. By the way, people are already being silenced for this exact reason. I know many Muslims, and I'm ashamed to say, I know many imams, they will not criticize Israel for this very reason. They need that visa to do their Hajj tour, to do their Umrah tour. Guess what? That's going away. No more visa. If you, not only you have to not criticize Zionism and Israel, which they already do. Like, do you think it's a coincidence that someone like Mufti Menk never says Israel? He never condemns Israel. You think that's a coincidence? No, he's worried about his visas being revoked, his access being revoked to the Haramain. That's going to be more common. Okay, all of these imams that you see that are doing their Hajj tours, their Umrah tours, they go and visit whenever they want. They're not going to be able to speak. They're not going to be allowed to criticize Zionism or Israel. They're not going to be able to criticize the taking over of Masjid al-Aqsa, right? Because they don't want to threaten their Hajj. They don't want to threaten their Hajj. And the ones that are munafiqeen, they don't want to threaten their money that comes from the Hajj tours, the Umrah tours. That's what they're worried about, because some of them make their livings off of that. This is how you silence the rest of the Muslim world. You control who can make Hajj. You think I can make Hajj? You think I can make Umrah right now as the situation is? You think I can fly into Saudi? What do you think that they'll do to me? Ever since I criticized them for Halloween and their Halloween celebration, you think I can fly to Saudi? Do you think Hajj is on the table? I'm not worried, of course. I'm not worried. Why? Because this is the house of Allah, and Allah is the one who decides. Allah is the one who controls who can be invited and visit his house and who can't. Allah is in control of that, so I'm not worried. Allah is in control of all affairs. But as a practical matter, I'm just telling you what's about to come down, what's about to happen. And that's going to be the policy. Social media, even if you're anonymous, your anonymous account, they have ways of finding out who's actually behind these accounts. They are already taking, like, the last piece that they were trying to take control of was Telegram. And they were able to do that because they arrested the founder and CEO of Telegram in Paris. And then immediately after, he changed the policies so that if they make a request, if the law enforcement makes a request to identify users on Telegram or to access the chats, you know, the group chats on Telegram, before Telegram would not comply. Now they're complying, for example. So even if in your group chats on Telegram, your secured chats, say something against Zionism, you know, just say something like Zionism sucks. Say goodbye to Hajj. I mean, do people not understand this? Like, tell me if I'm crazy. Like, am I crazy? Like, am I just being paranoid? You think that this is like too far from the realm of possibility? You don't think that these shayateen are taking these steps? Or do you just believe whatever you read on CNN or you see, like, on your feed from, I don't know. So, yeah, this is when there's no deterrent, when there's no force to deter Israel, they will do this and much more without any hesitation. Yeah, so now what about Muslim Zionism? We already have the Madkhalis. We have the Madkhalis, which I've discussed at length. Imagine Madkhalis on steroids. we would laugh. Muslims would laugh at, look at these Christian Zionists. Oh, they're so bought and controlled. They think that the Bible is pro-Israel. They think that the Bible is really pro the chosen ones. Guess what? That's coming. May Allah protect us, but that's on the agenda. There's Christian Zionists. There needs to be Muslim Zionists. The Masajid, why not? Like, this is in line with the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the lizard hole hadith, that we're going to follow them handspan by handspan, even unto the lizard hole. And the companions asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do you mean the Jews and the Christians? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded, Famen, who else? Then who, if not the Jews and the Christians? Guess what? Christians are Zionists, Jews are Zionists, Muslims are going to be Zionists. There are already some. Look at that go on steroids. Doing fundraisers for Israel in the masajid. Why not? Why not? Having, a study Quran that is dedicated to interpreting any ayah that mentions Bani Israel or Yahud, with footnotes, reinterpreting. This is actually what it means. Like, no, this is an Abrahamic religion. We're all united. This is not like theoretical. They're doing it. They're doing it. The Abrahamic religion, that's what it is. That's what Muslim Zionism is. And your American agents are pushing it. Hamza Yusuf is pushing this. And he has his conference, Reviving the Islamic Spirit, with his partner, Zaid Shakir. And your beloved compassionate imams are going and speaking at it just this past year. Who was it? Yasser Qadi, Omar Suleiman, all these guys. They go and sit with Hamza Yusuf and they go speak at his conference. And the same Hamza Yusuf that said that, yeah, why don't we share the Temple Mount? Why does it just have to be Muslims? Like, why can't we consider that? Read the writing on the walls, people. Wake up. I'm trying to wake you up. And instead of trusting what I'm telling you, instead of trusting me, after years of consistency, consistently calling out these problems, consistently calling out liberalization when no one else was calling out, feminism when no one else was calling it out, women's education and empowerment when no one else has been calling that out, the marriage crisis when no one else was pointing out the problem with the marriage crisis is women's empowerment and women's education. Okay? The long history of calling out Madkhalis and the Abrahamic religion. Look at how many articles do we have on MuslimSkeptic dedicated to the Abrahamic religion. We've done more on that. I've done more documenting the Madkhalis and their ties with government agencies. Like looking at the documentation more than anyone else. But you still don't trust me? You still don't trust me? And then some moron, whether he's a Madkhali or he's just some other moron, says that, oh, Daniel thinks that it's not good news that Nasrallah has been assassinated. Daniel is a crypto Shi'i agent. And you're going to be confused by that. You're going to have doubts about that. And you're going to believe that. Where's the trust? It's disappointing, I'm afraid. Some of you. I know some of you are not jaded or you're not confused by these agents. But some of you, unfortunately, are. Some of you are, and I don't know how to wake you up. So expect the new wave of Muslim Zionism. That's coming. That's already here. It's just going to be taken to level 100. Because guess what? All of these programs are funded by Israel. And if Israel doesn't have to worry about dealing with antagonistic forces like Iran and Hezbollah, they're going to fund more millions of dollars into these programs in the West, in Southeast Asia, in the subcontinent, in Africa, to make Muslim Zionism a reality. And maybe it's not you and your peers, your age group that's going to be targeted. It's going to be your children that's targeted. Your children are going to be targeted. And so many of you send your children to state schools. You send them to the public schools. You send them to the state schools. And we've already reported on Muslim Skeptic how the textbooks in Saudi, in Qatar, in Jordan, they're edited by Israeli agencies to make sure that they're up to standards, to moderate Islam standards. The textbooks are being edited to reflect the Abrahamic religion. It's there. These plans are being, it's not like a new thing. Like they've laid the groundwork. They laid the groundwork. So it's not like some distant possibility. Daniel is just fear mongering using bizarre, fantastical scenarios. No, it's not a fantasy. This is happening. This has been happening. Yeah, your children are the ones who are going to be the Muslim Zionists, God forbid. They're the ones that they're aiming to be the Muslim Zionists. Maybe not you necessarily, because you're going to remember the images of the Palestinian children blown to bits. You're going to remember that poor Palestinian girl who had her face blown off, or the poor Palestinian 5-year-old whose brain was missing. He just had a hollowed out skull. You and me will remember those images till our graves, but our children or our children's children won't necessarily see them because the social media loopholes that exist right now are being closed. They're being closed. And I'll tell you how that's going to happen, because guess what? There's going to be a new chapter on the war on terror. There's a new chapter on the war on extremism. They've already, in certain places, made it the law that criticizing Zionism is anti-Semitism. And it's hate, it's bigotry, it is not allowed. It's illegal to criticize Zionism. So all of those posts, all of that news that you've been getting on social media about what the genocide that's taking place, you think that the future generations will necessarily have access to that material? Don't be naive. That's what I'm telling you. Stop being naive about the future. Those loopholes are being closed as we speak. You think Elon Musk is going to allow this to continue? You think they don't have dirt on him, material on him? Do you think the next president that's going to be elected is going to allow things to continue as they have? Maybe. You know, I wish I had that level of optimism, but I don't. My post, one of my posts just yesterday was flagged as hate. What post? I criticized Madkhalis. It was a post calling Madkhalis the traitors of the Ummah. That post was flagged for hate. Now, I don't get it. The Twitter terms of service say that you can't attack someone on the basis of their national origin or their race or their gender, their sexual orientation, or their national origin or their religious affiliation. So now is Madkhaliism like a religion, like a separate religion? You can't even criticize the ideology of being a Madkhali bootlicker. Otherwise, that's hate. That indicates to me that, okay, they are ramping things up. If they include Zionism as being protected, you can't criticize Zionism without being hate, then why not Madkhaliism? Why not the Abrahamic religion? If you criticize the Abrahamic religion, that is hate against a religious group, and they will censor that. And if you post things like that, you're an anti-Semite or you're an extremist, you're part of a terror group, you're Khawarij. They're already saying that. These Saudi bots, these UAE bots are already saying that you are Khariji if you criticize the Abrahamic religion. You're a Khariji. Rabbi Ferris, okay, when he's saying that you are a Khariji if you boycott Starbucks, you're a Khariji if you criticize Israel, you're a Khariji if you criticize Judaism. Like, he's already saying things like this. Either he's saying things like boycott Starbucks is making you a Khariji. He's already said that. He's tweeted it. We've covered it. But even sharing, remember how he had his fatwa? If you share pictures of Palestinian, the atrocities committed against Palestinians, like, this is wrong, this is haram, you should not share these. Remember when he said that? Are you connecting the dots? Criticizing Israel, criticizing other religions like Judaism, or Hinduism, those two in particular, this is hate and extremism and terrorism. There's not going to be any social media for these types of critiques. I'm sorry to tell you. That's why, you know, I'm trying to build networks off of these social media platforms to the best that I can. But even those, Allahu Alam. Wake up, people. So colleges, college campuses, they've cracked down. They've replaced any of the university presidents in the Ivy League who weren't fully on board with cracking down on pro-Palestine protests. They just replaced them, like at Harvard or Penn. They just replaced the university presidents and they put in a policy. If you are pro-Palestinian, that is anti-Semitism and it cannot be allowed. So that playbook, that blueprint is going to be extended throughout society. And it's going to have the force of law behind it. And again, what is driving these kinds of policies? It's foreign lobbying, foreign money. Israel is pumping millions of dollars into these kinds of, in this kind of lobbying to push these policies and these laws. If they don't have to worry about Hezbollah, they don't have to worry about Iran, they don't have to worry about any kind of regional threat, they can dedicate full attention, 100% attention on these policies, on pumping these policies up throughout the world. And yeah, one generation, me and you, we're going to be protesting this and opposing it, but are we going to be successful? Or the next generation is going to be subject to not like a world and media universe or media environment that is fully pro-Zionist. Basically what things were prior to the internet. Basically the boomer generation in the West. Like you're looking at Christians, like imagine America used to be an anti-Semitic country. Christianity used to be an anti-Semitic religion in the sense that they had a lot of prejudice against Jews. And that country and that religion is now the most pro-Israel, the most pro-Judaism. That happened, how long did it take? Less than 100 years. Less than 100 years they were able to do it without the technology that they have now. Without the technology that they have now. So now we're in a weaker position and they're in a stronger position. It's not going to take 100 years. It's not going to take 50 years. Connect the dots, people, please. So, full new chapter on the war on terror. Jared Kushner is signaling this. Okay, what else does the war on terror involve? It involves more surveillance. It involves more no-fly lists. It involves more monitoring of all of our purchases, all of our online and offline behaviors, monitoring all of the masajid in the West and the East, putting in place imams who are controlled. That's going to be ramped up to 11. More liberalization. So you have Muslims who are whining about, oh, Saudi Arabia has Halloween, Saudi Arabia is jailing the scholars, Saudi Arabia has rock concerts, and they have, what's that person's name? Nicki Minaj doing a concert, and that other lady who was singing about worshiping her. She's a goddess. Like, are you complaining about that? Guess what? That's going to be taken to 11 as well. The liberalization. They're doing that stuff even without normalization with Israel. So imagine once that normalization comes with Saudi, they're going to be doing that in, you know, right outside the haram, right outside the cities. They're already doing it within miles. Like, why not? Who's going to stop us? Who's going to stop us? Jailing any scholar, anyone who's within Saudi or within the Gulf. And then outside the Gulf, same thing. They detained many imams after 9/11. Same process. Okay, same process. Is just they have the script already. They're going to rerun it with slight modifications. Liberalization is going to be taken to the next level. Yeah, because Israel knows that what the main enemy that they have against their designs is Islam. Islam and Muslim identity. Muslims are, because by virtue of the Quran, by virtue of their beliefs, they are anti-Zionism. So the way that you neutralize that is by getting rid of the religion. And you get rid of the religion through liberalization. When Muslims are, enjoying the music concerts and they're enjoying, they're just okay with discarding the hijab, they're okay with discarding their beliefs or their aqidah in favor of this Abrahamic religion, they're not going to be in any opposition to the Zionist project, the Greater Israel Project. All the Muslim educational institutions like Azhar, Islamic University of Medina, these places have been co-opted, by the way, a long time ago. They've been co-opted and they have been spreading a liberalized version of Islam for a long time, many years. Azhar longer, obviously, than Islamic University of Medina, but the past 10 years, Islamic University of Medina is not what it used to be. And it's going to get worse. It's only going to get worse and worse. Everything. All these Muslim organizations, they're not going to be able to operate in the West if you're not on board with Zionism, because you're an extremist. You're anti-Semite extremist. They're going to be very strict regulations in place. They already have that, by the way, in the US. Anyone who wants a state contract has to sign a loyalty pledge to Israel that you pledge not to boycott Israel. Texas, for example, if you want a contract, like if you sell hot dogs and you want to be able to sell hot dogs on some kind of state property, you have to sign a contract with the state of Texas. You have to agree not to boycott Israel. You think that they won't, make that part of your 501(c) nonprofit status? You want charity status? Promise you will not boycott Israel. You think that that's not on the table? Like that's not what they're pushing for? So all of these nonprofit Muslim organizations that you just love your charity status because you're in the UK, you're in Canada, you're in Australia, you're in the US. You just love getting that zakat money and you love getting the donations because it's tax-free. It's tax-free, or the people who are donating, they can write it off on their taxes. You just love getting that money, and that's I'm using this derisive tone because many of these masajid and organizations, they have been politically quiet and quietist and turned the other cheek in the face of clear haram, clear attacks on deen. They didn't speak out. Why? Because they wanted to preserve their charity status. But you trampled on the rights of Allah. You trampled on your Islamic obligation for the sake of your own pocket. What is the pattern with that? What is the sunnah of Allah? Allah will still take it away from you. Allah will still take that thing away from you that you coveted in place of obedience to Allah. So those charity statuses, expect those to go away unless you pledge not to criticize Israel, you pledge not to mention Palestine or engage in any type of anti-Semitism as we define it, if you want to maintain your charity status. That's in the pipeline, people. So, what do you think is going to be left? What do you think is going to be left in terms of activism, pro-Palestinian activism? Then we'll see. Then we'll see. Then we'll see who's really fighting for the Palestinian cause when it becomes. When it's no longer lucrative to do so, when it hits you in the pocket, then we'll see who's really going to continue to advocate for the Palestinians. These compassionate imams, we'll see their backbone and their mettle when these kinds of policies roll through. We've already seen how the possibility of losing Hajj tour status, how that has silenced a lot of them. A lot of the Salafi imams have been silenced because of that. That's just the beginning. So Now, let me go to Super Chats as a pause, and then we'll go to the final part of the program or the show today where I address some of the common arguments against all that I've presented and said. But at this point, I hope you realize that this is what is happening. This is the writing on the wall. This is the impact of eliminating all opposition to Israel. So I don't care how much you hate Iran, how much you hate Hezbollah, how much you hate what they have done in terms of atrocities, killing and pillaging and murdering Sunnis in Syria and Iraq and elsewhere. I hate it too. It's disgusting. It's vile. What is the consequence of them being eliminated or neutralized? Think about it. Go past the obvious that we all accept, get past the emotion, and think 2 steps ahead. They're the last break. They're the last bulwark. They're the last blockade. Once that blockade has been bulldozed, then it is like releasing, Pandora's box, opening Pandora's box. And another analogy that I don't want to use because I don't want this stream to be deleted. So, okay. Let's look at your super chats. Who is the bigger enemy, Shia or Zionist? Explain. It's just so shocking. It's just so, even if you take this incorrect position that all Shia are kuffar, like how can you compare what Israel has done to Muslims just in the past year to anything that has been done by Iran or Hezbollah or Shia? Like, how are you that dense? Like, I'm sorry, like, I don't mean to insult you, but you are at a level of ignorance about the situation that you're just going to hurt yourself or you're going to hurt others because you don't know what the reality is. You know that Israel has just murdered over 200,000 Palestinians in Gaza over the course of just 10 months. 200,000, possibly 300,000. 200,000 is the conservative estimate of how many they have killed. That is over 10%. They've killed over 10%. 1 out of 10 Palestinians have been killed. Where has Iran or Hezbollah done this? Like, if you want to look at the death toll in Syria or in Iraq over the past 10 years or 11 years, okay, take that number. Does it extend to even 1 million people? No. And I defy anyone to bring me actual third-party resources to justify that 1 million Syrians, Sunni Syrians, have been killed by Assad or Iranian forces or Hezbollah. 1 million. Can you justify that? I would say it's closer to 300,000, maybe 400,000. And that's just on one side because guess what? The opposition forces, the rebel forces have also, I'm not talking about ISIS. The rebel forces have also killed many. They have also killed many on the other side. So calculate that and bring me just in what Israel has done in the past 9 months or 10 months overshadows anything that Iran and Hezbollah have done. Now, a smart person will look at the history of Israel, what Israel has done in pushing for the invasion of Iraq, pushing for the invasion of Afghanistan, okay, pushing for the occupation of Libya, the invasion of Libya. How many millions of Muslims have been killed and displaced because of that global war on terror since 9/11? putting aside who actually was responsible for 9/11, by the way, which we cannot talk about on YouTube. How many Muslims? 1 million? 2 million? 1 million is the conservative estimate. 38 or 37 million displaced. That's from Israel. That's from Israel. Just in the past 23 years. So you tell me who is the bigger enemy. And we're not even talking about the PSYOP or the continued illegalization of Muslims through CVE programs, countering violent extremism programs that have made Islam basically illegal. Traditional conservative Islam has been made illegal throughout the world because of what? Who's pushing these policies? The paper trail is there. All of the information and evidence is there, but you have to be blind not to see it. Like, you have to be blind and confused. So to even ask the question is embarrassing. It's like so embarrassing and stupid. I'm sorry. Started spamming your content quite recently. Keep up the great work, Brother Daniel. Appreciate it. Brother, I really appreciate your super chat. How long do we have until the Mahdi arrives, given that the majority of the signs have occurred? Appreciate your super chat, brother. We will see. I mean, I can't give an exact timeline, and that's not the way that this works. The majority of the minor signs of the hour have been completed many years ago. So we are now waiting for the major signs. And the first of the major signs is the Mahdi, Imam Mahdi. So when that happens, inshallah, there will be obligations that we have. We have the obligation to follow him. But the question that we should be asking ourselves, are we even ready to follow the Mahdi? Are we even ready to follow a leader? That's the question that Muslims should be asking themselves. I don't see that kind of unity, or not unity, but good followership. Good followership. I don't see it. Good, like, how about we implement the kind of followership that will be needed when the Mahdi comes, inshallah? How about we embody that and we practice that now? Instead, we have constant fragmentation. No group is too small to be fragmented, to not be fragmented further. You have Salafis who will not work with Ash'aris and vice versa. Why? I don't know. I don't know. And when I propose it, I'm canceled. I'm ostracized. I'm saying that, look, Sunnis, we're Sunnis who we care about the Quran and Sunnah and the Salaf, and we care about the tradition of Islam. And yeah, there are differences, and I have my own views on who is correct on what. But that doesn't prevent us from having a conference together. To have a conference where we talk about the dangers of liberalism, and we talk about the dangers of Zionism, and we talk about strategizing. Sunnis only here at a conference. Can we do that? No, Daniel. No, we can't. What's your aqidah? What's your let me quiz you and grill you on what your aqidah is, and let me try to embarrass you in front of our entire conference. Like, yeah, that's how we have to advance the dawah. That's really serving the interests of the ummah. Like, look at the retardation. Look how stupid. So yeah, have your little group. Have your little group. You're on the right manhaj. I'm sure you are. and same on the other side. The same on the other side. Okay, unfortunately. Forget about Shia. Forget about, like, oh, in order to prevent this disaster and this continued genocide that we see in 4K, instead of worrying about that, I don't know what to tell you. So, like, how are we going to follow the Mahdi? How are we going to follow the Mahdi when you can't even have the wherewithal? Like, do you think it's going to be like things are already so clear, like the right path is so clear? Like, why? The whole point of the Mahdi, like what makes the Mahdi so clear that you follow him, is the enemy is so clear. The opposition is so clear. The danger is so clear. And here is an imam, and there will be signs and indications, but the signs and indications can always be rejected. You can always bring doubts, and you can always bring questions. Like, what exactly does he think about istawa ala al-arsh? I won't follow him until I know exactly what Imam Mahdi thinks about that. I will not follow him until I know exactly what he thinks about raising the hands in salah. Why won't those questions arise? Like, I won't be convinced that he is the Mahdi unless I understand exactly what he says on A, B, C, D issue. If he disagrees with me, he's not the Mahdi. Do you think that's not going to be the response? Do you not understand that that's going to be the response of a large majority? Whoever said like that the Imam Mahdi will come and then the whole ummah will unite behind him? Whoever said that? That's not the hadith don't say that. The hadith say he's going to be opposed. He's going to have to go to war. That's what the hadith say. So why are you asking? And I'm not trying to shout at you, brother. I'm saying the general you. Why are you asking when is the Mahdi come when you're not ready to follow the Mahdi? You're not ready. Because the situation that when the context in which the Mahdi arrives and is revealed, we're in that context and situation now. We're in that situation now, and it's constant infighting, argument, and a disillusion or lack of recognition of the clear and present danger, the clear and present problem, enemy. We're getting questions here on the super chat. Who's the bigger enemy, Shia or Israel or Zionism? Yeah, that's going to be the same kind of conversation. Well, who's really, who's the real biggest enemy? It seems like this so-called Mahdi is causing fitna, and he's wrong on these issues. And don't you think that the enemies of the Mahdi are going to put up all of these same arguments? Don't you think they're going to put up the same kinds of arguments to dissuade the ummah from following him, to convince the ummah that actually this is an extremist, this is a person who has the wrong aqidah, this person is not on the correct manhaj, this person, I'm a Muslim, but this so-called Mahdi, he doesn't have the right position on this. I'm sorry, I can't work with him. I can't follow so-called Mahdi. The real Mahdi is still, he's going to come later. You don't think that that's going to be the debate? That's going to be the conversation? Ask yourself if you have what it takes to follow the Mahdi. Are you going to be chosen to follow the Mahdi? That's only a select group. That's not for everyone. That's not guaranteed to me or you or to any Muslim that, oh yeah, the Mahdi is going to come and you're going to have the wherewithal and the insight and the understanding to recognize him as the Mahdi and then to follow him. That's not guaranteed. Allah has to choose you to follow his imam. What are you doing to be chosen by Allah to follow the Mahdi? The test is right now. The test is today. The people who follow him, the Muslims that follow him, are a small minority. A small minority, the creme de la creme. Am I part of that creme de la creme? Are you? That's what we should be asking ourselves. That's the test. That's the question. So worry about that. Yeah, so here's a good comment. I meant to say this. Hamas and Sunni movements work with Iran, so I get it. Yeah, this is such an obvious point. And I appreciate the super chat for this brother saying it. Any kind of chest beating, okay, like this clown that made his sarcastic remark before in the super chat. Anyone who's beating their chest about, oh, Daniel, he's a crypto Shia agent because he thinks that Sunnis should work with Shia to repel the threat. Daniel is a crypto Shia. He doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the pain of the Syrians. This is their claim, right? Well, if they can beat their chest and denounce me. Okay, buddy, man up and denounce the Palestinian resistance. Man up and denounce Abu Ubaidah. Man up and denounce Ismail Haniyeh. Man up and denounce these resistance forces. Go ahead. You're so tough. You're such a man. You're able to tweet against Daniel. Wow. Oh. You're really strong and brave. Someone like Jake, okay? Jake, why don't you tweet against these Palestinian forces? These Palestinian resistance forces that work with Hezbollah. I'd like to know that. I'd like to see those tweets. You're so brave and strong, right? So do it. All of these guys, okay, I understand that they're not, this was their big brain response, right? That Daniel is calling all of us Medkhalis just because we don't like Hezbollah. I don't like Hezbollah, but I recognize the reality of the situation. And I never claim that you're all Medkhalis. I clearly distinguish who the Medkhalis are. You're not Medkhalis. Medkhalis are like explicitly like Muslim Zionists who say things like, if you boycott Israel, you're a Khariji and it's haram. Like those are the Medkhalis. They're deliberate agents like Rabbi Ferris. You guys are just useful idiots for Zionism. You're just useful idiots for Zionism because your activities are helping the Zionist cause. Like you're just useful idiots for Zionism, but you're not Medkhalis. I don't think that they're Zionists. I don't think that they are opposed to boycott or they're happy about normalization. No, they oppose all of that. But nonetheless, the attitudes that they express are convenient and helpful for the Zionist cause, at least online, on social media. So that's the response that, when they say Daniel is a crypto Shia and he doesn't understand the pain of Syrians. Okay, well, do these Palestinian resistance groups, do they understand it? Because they're actually working with Hezbollah. They're actually working with Iran. If you didn't know that already, say no, Daniel that's their situation. Daniel, they have no choice. They have to take aid and support from Iran and Hezbollah. They have to. You're not in that situation. What are you talking about? Like, I'm not saying go and do a kumbaya session at the Shia masjid. I'm not saying bring the Shia imam and let's pray Jummah behind the Shia imam. Like, I'm just talking about specifically that scenario that the Palestinians are in, specifically that scenario that the Lebanese are in, specifically that scenario that the Syrians are in, facing the barrel of this Zionist weapon. In that situation is when we need to be allied. That's all I'm talking about. And that's exactly what the Palestinian resistance is doing. So if I'm wrong for saying it and I'm a crypto Shia for saying it, how wrong are they, the Palestinian resistance, for actually doing it? Use those two brain cells you got rattling in there. Think a little bit. How is that consistent? So my problem with these people is, first, they're completely ignorant about politics. They're completely ignorant about history. That's number one. Number two, which is even worse, they're inconsistent. They're inconsistent. They can only beat their chest and make these tweets against me. I'm a convenient target. If they were consistent, they were the first and foremost, they should be blasting nonstop for 9 months the Palestinian resistance that has been taking aid and support from these Shia groups. If they were consistent, but you don't see that record, do you? You don't see a record of condemnation. That's because they're not doing this on the basis of a principled stance. So I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired of these losers. They need to stick to their domain. Their domain is very limited. They need to stick to that, like pointing out contradictions in the Bible. Just stick to that. Don't talk about issues that you have no clue about, no understanding. You can only throw stones like, oh, he said that it's a bad thing for Israel to assassinate and decapitate Hezbollah. He's a Shia. He's a secret Iranian agent, and he accuses us of being madkhali. No, we're not madkhali. Yeah, I didn't accuse you of being madkhali. I accuse you of being an idiot. I accuse you of being stupid and inconsistent. If you're consistent, your criticism of me would apply 1,000-fold to the people, the Palestinians, literally getting this kind of support from those countries. Next super chat. Yeah, someone saying that he's done. Yeah, get lost. Like, I'm supposed to cry. Like, don't assume I'm not against MBS and the UAE. Did I accuse you of not being against them? Also, you just described Assad normalization with more words. Keep insulting all Syrian Sunnis. I'm done. Yeah, get lost. Get lost. Yeah, exactly. Like, all of these, here's a good comment. In fact, the rulers of the Gulf, like MBS, are the ones who are normalizing relations with Assad. Yeah, that's... And by the way, you don't think that these Gulf countries have been involved in Syria? You think they have no blood on their hands? So again, the problem is the consistency. You have this kind of death or blood feud with one group, and you're ignoring all the other implicated groups. That's just not consistent. And fine, if there was nothing at stake, be hardcore against one and ignore everyone else. Whatever, it has no consequence. But this does have a consequence. It does have a consequence when you single out one group, because it just happens to be the group that is the break and the bulwark and the blockade and the wall against the genocide of Gaza being exported en masse to the rest of the Muslim world. So it does have consequences. So if you're not fully a Zionist, like the Madkhalis and the leaders of these Gulf nations who want to enrich themselves with normalization with Israel, if you're not in that camp, you're a useful idiot. If you hate Shia more than Israel, you have nifaq, hypocrisy. Yeah, or maybe not to that extent. You're just stupid. That could be another explanation. But it could just be ignorance. Like, you think that, oh, the Shia, they're all kuffar. And you don't understand that that's not a correct takfir that you're doing. Like, the kinds of criticisms that you're making against Shia, they apply to many Sunni groups, by the way, right? What are the criticisms? They say, well, you're a kafir if you insult the Sahaba. Okay, there's details in this. By the way, did you know that? Insulting the Sahaba doesn't mean that you're automatically a kafir, according to Sunnism. Insulting the Sahaba can't be automatic kafir status. Why? Because some of the Sahaba insulted each other. So are the Sahaba kuffar? Wa'yadhu billah. So how are you... There are conditions, like what kind of insult is it? Is it insulting all of the Sahaba? Then yes, that is kufr. And that will take you out of Islam because it contradicts the Quran. And the companions of the Prophet ﷺ in generality are praised. So if you are insulting and denouncing all of the Sahaba, then that is kufr because it contradicts the ayah of the Quran. But that's not what Shia do, by the way. That's not what they do. It's one Sahabi or two Sahaba. That's not according to Sunnism and the ulama of Ahlul Sunnah. It's not automatically that you're a kafir if you insult the Sahaba. It depends on the nature of the insult and the who exactly you're insulting, what you're insulting them for. There are rules and there's much that has been written about this, but people, they don't care about. They just have this kind of cartoon understanding of the situation. Another thing that they criticize Shia for, they're taking their imams as having these kinds of powers and knowledge, and they're getting revelation. Like, that's not the dominant view amongst the Shia. Yeah, there are some Shia that fall under that. The dominant view of the Shia is that the imams are preserving the revelation. They're ma'soom, they're without sin, in that they do not incorrectly interpret the Quran. That is the majority view of the Shia. Again, they're Ahlul Bid'ah. Like, this is a deviant position to follow 12 imams and to consider that to be the basis of Islam. That is deviance. But does it reach kufr? That's the question. For some it does, and for some it doesn't. If you just say that, if you believe that your imam has this kind of insight, or your imam has these kinds of supernatural powers, that makes you a kafir, then guess what? A lot of Sunnis become kuffar because of that principle. A lot of Sunni Muslims will say that the Prophet ﷺ controls the universe, and there's not an atom that moves without the control of the Prophet ﷺ. So if one is kufr, the other one is kufr. If one is a kafir, the other is a kafir. Be consistent, in your takfir. And much more can be said about this. So that's why Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, this is why in our times, Shaykh al-Albani, Mufti Taqi Osmani, they have said that it's a case-by-case basis with the Shia. You don't make mass takfir. That's the majority position. So unfortunately, there's a lot of propaganda. From who? Guess. Who is spreading this kind of propaganda? I wonder. While I'm on this point, now let me address some of the, before I get to the rest of the super chats, let me get to some of the arguments that are being made against me. Here's argument number 1. You, Daniel, say that we shouldn't have a celebration about the end of Hezbollah. You're saying that we should be concerned or sad or fearful of what the future holds. But don't you know about Surat Rum? Don't you recognize when Allah says that the Romans would be victorious? Meaning victorious over the Persians, that the believers will rejoice? When two kafir nations are fighting, the Romans and the Persians, one becomes dominant and wins over, then the believers rejoice. Don't you know about those ayat, Daniel? So then how can't you understand how we're celebrating with this strike against Beirut? This is the argument. So let's address that argument by looking at the verses first of all. The Romans have been defeated, meaning it's referring to the Byzantines, in the nearest land, but they, after their defeat, will overcome. They'll triumph. Within 3 to 9 years, to Allah, they'll be defeated. To Allah belongs the command before and after, and that day the believers will rejoice. Okay, isn't that the situation now? We have two factions. In the past, it was the Romans and the Persians. Now we have the the Israelis and Hezbollah, two factions fighting. One has been defeated. Let's rejoice. How is this analogous? How is this analogous? First of all, the Romans and the Persians, these were two kafir factions. And I've just said that we cannot do mass takfir of the Shia. So they should not be seen as equivalent to the Persians or equivalent to the Byzantines. That's point number one. Point number two, the Romans or the Persians weren't actively invading and genociding hundreds of thousands of Muslims. The Romans weren't involved with that. So if the Romans win and the Muslims rejoice, that's not analogous to Israel winning and then Muslims rejoicing. The Romans weren't massacring and ethnically cleansing and creating this massive global operation against Islam in the way that Zionism is. So this is completely disanalogous. This is completely disanalogous. Like, you just have a cartoon understanding of ayat of the Quran, and you don't even reflect on the applicability of those ayat to our current situation. If these were two random groups, if imagine Israel is fighting Thailand, and there's one group that's clearly more aligned with Muslim interests, and that group wins, then obviously Muslims will rejoice. Obviously. But how are you rejoicing when the winning group, the dominating group, is Israel, that's actively involved in genociding Muslims and it has imminent plans to genocide more and take over the entire Middle East, to control Masjid al-Aqsa, to control the Haramain? How can you be joyful about that? How can you rejoice? It boggles my mind. So this is that first argument against what I've said and what I've tweeted. The second point that they make is that, oh, Daniel, you say that the compassionate imams are deviant and that we shouldn't ally with the compassionate imams, but you're fine with allying with the Shia, which are also deviant. Isn't that inconsistent? Aren't you being inconsistent, Daniel, when you say that? One policy for the compassionate imams and the reformists, another policy for the Shia. That means you're a crypto Shia. That means you are an Iranian agent. Okay, so what's the answer to this argument? I've already addressed this many times, but I'll just reiterate it on camera. Okay, so I've suggested allying with Shia. I've also in the past advocated allying with traditional Christians or other groups. The difference is there are many disanalogies here. The compassionate imams were allying with who? They're allying with LGBT. They're allying with Jewish groups. They're allying with these liberal Christian groups for their interfaith. To do what? To make the haram something halal. They're allying in a way to change Islam. That was the problem. That's what's making them deviant in a way that we can't ally with such people, because they're attacking Islam in order to normalize LGBT, to normalize feminism and all of these disasters. Look at my videos on these compassionate imams. The main thing was, like, watch Dark Legacy. They're saying, these compassionate imams, their leaders, their heads, were saying that we need to ally with LGBT. We need to support their rights. Their rights are our rights. We need to live in this we need to coexist in harmony with them, when they're, by the way, are changing the law of the land to force Muslim schools to teach the rainbow. They're forcing employers like Muslim businesses to not discriminate against them and their lifestyle. That's the harmony that they're advocating. That is a disaster for the Muslim community. That is a disaster for they're making the haram into halal. Even the very idea that Muslims can support LGBT rights, which is what they were arguing, that is what the compassionate imam spent almost a decade spreading. So of course you don't ally with that. Of course you don't ally with groups that are pose that kind of threat. Whereas with Shia, no one is becoming Shi'i. I'm not saying bring the Shi'i imam into the masajid so that the Shi'i imam can lead the prayer. Let's fundraise for this Shia masjid, this Shi'i group. Am I saying that? No, but you had compassionate imams. Bring Ilhan Omar into the masajid, fundraising for her. They're doing it again, by the way. Fundraising for someone like Ilhan Omar, who goes and marches in the gay pride parades, or Rashida Tlaib. They're fundraising for her. They're inviting her to speak at the conferences. They're putting her on a pedestal. This is an attack on Islam. I'm not saying bring in Shi'i imams. And by the way, that's not what is expected. It's a very constrained, specific situation to prevent an active genocide. It's a very clear difference, very clear difference. And then also, when it comes to LGBT, these compassionate imams, by the way, are not allying with another group that is fighting a larger power. The situation when it comes to Sunnis and Shia creating a block against the Zionist encroachment, that is two equivalent powers trying to block a stronger power, joining forces to block a bigger power. The LGBT agenda, the liberalization agenda that the compassionate imams are pushing to this day, that is a government program. That is government liberalization from on high. And then these sellouts are collaborating with the US government. They're collaborating with the US government, with NGOs, with all of these well-funded, government-funded groups, interfaith groups. That's who they're allying with in order to change the rest of the Muslim community to liberalize and to accept these kinds of liberal ideals and to support LGBT rights and to live with them in harmony. That's a big difference. So also relevant when we look at allying, because this is a question that keeps coming up. Like, why can't we ally, or why should we ally with this or that group? What's the basis for that? Let's look at some of the verses. So this is a verse that's cited often. "O you who have believed, do not take the Jews and Christians as allies. They are in fact allies of one another. And whoever is an ally to them among you, then indeed he is one of them. Indeed, Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people." So this is one ally that's one ayah that's often cited. But there are other ayat that we have to consider. So this ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, "Let not believers take disbelievers as allies," i.e. supporters or protectors, "rather than believers. And whoever one of you does that has nothing," i.e. no association with Allah, "except when taking precaution against them in prudence. And Allah warns you of himself, and to Allah is the final destination." So this is also relevant. But look at what the ayah says. Taking disbelievers as allies rather than believers. Rather than believers. So does that mean that we can never ally with disbelievers? No. It means specifically allying with them when it's against other Muslims. You ally with disbelievers when you ally with disbelievers when there is an option to ally with believers, but you ignore those believers and you prefer the disbelievers. That's what is being prohibited in this verse. So when you take these two verses together, it's saying that don't ally with groups that are against Muslims. But you have to calculate all of the different groups that are fighting each other. So in the case of Israel, they are genociding Muslims worse than any other group on the face of the earth, and arguably over the past 100 years. So let me read some scholarly sources if you don't believe me. Maybe you think I'm just making things up. So let's go to this source on Islam QA. Okay, let me see. Okay, supporting the mushrikeen and helping them against the Muslims. Oh, hold on. That's point number 8 of things that will take you out of Islam. Okay, this is according to Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Okay, so this is Islam QA. These are the nullifiers of Islam. So number 8. Okay. I'm choosing this source because these are the types of people that are mainly leading the charge in attacking me. So that's why I'm specifically choosing this source as opposed to something else. But there are many sources that say exactly the same thing that aren't coming from Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Clear on that? Okay, the evidence for that is the verse in which Allah says, and if any amongst you takes them as awliya, meaning friends, protectors, helpers, then surely he is one of them. Verily Allah guides not those people who are the zalimun and wrongdoers and unjust, meaning the wrongdoers and the unjust. This is in Surah Al-Ma'idah, which we read. So then the commentary of this. What is meant by that is if a Muslim supports and aids the disbelievers against the Muslims and he forms an alliance with their party instead of the party of the believers. Okay, can you see that? Let me expand. So you're specifically choosing to ally with disbelievers against other believers. That is the problem that the ayah is referring to. In his commentary on the verse in which Allah says, Azza wa Jalla, it says, let not the believers take the disbelievers as awliya instead of the believers, and whoever does that will never be helped by Allah in any way. At-Tabari said, do not, O believers, take the disbelievers as a source of help and support, or ally yourself with them in support of their religion, supporting them against the Muslims instead of the believers, and telling them about the Muslims' weak points, for whoever does that will never be helped by Allah in any way. What is meant is that he has disavowed Allah and Allah has disavowed him because of his apostasy from his religion and his becoming a disbeliever, except if you indeed fear a danger from them. That is, unless, which is the other verse that I read first from Surah Al-Imran, unless you are under their rule, and you fear that they may kill you, so you pay lip service to giving them support whilst concealing enmity towards them in your hearts, and you do not support them in what they are following of disbelief or help them against any Muslim in any way. So that is from At-Tabari. The scholars of Morocco issued a fatwa stating that Muhammad ibn Abdullah as-Sa'di, one of the kings of Marrakesh, became a disbeliever when he sought the help of the king of Portugal against his paternal uncle. Okay, so he sought the help of the kuffar against another believer. Let's see. How much should I read of this? Okay, let me continue reading. In Al-Qada min Nawazil, Imam al-Burzuli says that the ruler of the Muslims, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, asked the scholars of his time about the Ibn Abbad al-Andalusi writing to the Franks, asking for help against the Muslims. Most of them replied that he was an apostate and a disbeliever. And then Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah issued a fatwa concerning those who joined the Tatars and fought the Muslims, stating that such a person was an apostate. And he said, if the Sahaba called those who withheld zakat apostates, even though they fasted and prayed and did not fight the main body of the Muslims, then how about those who have joined the enemies of Allah and His Messenger to fight the Muslims? Okay, so that's very clear. So just allying with disbelievers, that in and of itself is not what takes you out of Islam. How could it be when the Prophet ﷺ had sulh and agreements with not only Ahlul Kitab, such as the Jews of Medina, but he also had sulh with the Mushrikeen? Don't you know about Hudaybiyah? Don't you know about the sulh of Hudaybiyah? That is also an agreement. That is a ceasefire type of agreement that he had with not only Ahlul Kitab, with Mushrikeen outright. So how can it be that you have an agreement or an alliance against a bigger threat be kufr or be not allowed in Islam? That's why these ignorant people, there's been like a bunch of different videos saying that Daniel is ignorant, and they cite the ayah and they don't read the tafsir. They don't cite the commentary. If you take the ayah as meaning that any alliance with disbelievers makes you a kafir, then what are you saying about the Prophet ﷺ, who did do that, who did have those alliances and those agreements? But they're ignorant of the sunnah, they're ignorant of the seerah, they're ignorant of tafsir. And so we read, one of the top sources, top Salafi source, Ibn Abdul Wahhab himself, who says that what takes you out of Islam, what nullifies your Islam, is when you are uniting with the disbelievers against the believers. That second part is what takes you out of Islam, not just allying with disbelievers. So that is the response to the second point that we see, the point about compassionate imams and alliances. And the problem with these compassionate imams is that they're allying with disbelievers against Islam, against Muslims, in a very clear and apparent way, because they want to make the haram into halal. They want to reform Islam. They want to introduce all kinds of deviance. That's why they're a different level of danger. So I hope that's clear. Now let's go back to Super Chats. I also have to think about the timing here because I have a debate in 2.5 hours on Sneako's channel. So if you want to see me debate on the question of immigration and white supremacy, white identity, I'm going to debate a white identitarian, Keith Woods, on the issue of immigration and white superiority. And that's going to happen on Sneako's channel on Rumble. So this is a great opportunity for you to go to Rumble, to sign up, and be on that app. You can watch the debate live. Okay, so let's continue the super chats. Jelma says, all the people attacking the axis of resistance show me their armies that are willing to confront Israel. Unfortunately, there are none. And even if there were, even if there was an army, Saudi sends an army, UAE sends an army, then should we support those armies? Why? Saudi has blood on its hands. Look at the kinds of crimes they committed against Yemeni Muslims. UAE has plenty of blood on its hands. Look at what they're currently doing in Sudan against the Sudanese Muslims. So we shouldn't support those armies, right? If you're consistent, your logic is consistent, that should be your stance. Even if those Gulf countries had any kind of army to defend Palestinians from being wiped out and slaughtered, then the people who are now whining about these other countries, they should also be opposed. But they're not. Instead, those same people are complaining. They're rightfully complaining about, why aren't these countries like Jordan and Saudi and UAE, why aren't they supporting or doing anything against Israel when Israel is committing a genocide? They'll say that, but they don't recognize the contradiction that, well, don't you know that those countries have Muslim blood on their hands as well? Without Hezbollah, Lebanon and Palestine is naked. I don't see any other conclusion. I highly recommend Sheikh Hassan al-Diddou's interpretation of Surah Isra in light of what's going on. Most accurate I've seen yet. That's a good suggestion. I'll check it out. You can always expect that Sheikh Diddou will have great commentary. Okay, let me answer two questions at the same time. As a Lebanese and Syrian Salafi, can I pray for Allah to forgive Hassan Nasrallah and make dua for him? I have respect and hatred of him. Is it haram? Is it haram to hate the guy? No. Also, respect your work, bro. May Allah reward you. Yeah, so I'm not mourning Nasrallah. Like, I'm not mourning him. I've made it very clear. I'm not like mourning him or going through that at all. But I recognize the implications of him and his organization and his resistance. The end of that, what that means for Muslims, what it means for Palestinians. It's a very simple point, and it's only madkhalis and useful idiots that are trying to misconstrue that into something it's not. I'm not the one who thinks that, oh, he's a hero and we need to be shedding tears. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying shed tears for the Muslims that are going to be the victims of what Israel is planning to do right now, today, and tomorrow. That's what you should be crying about. May Allah have mercy on all the Muslims who are being killed, whether it's by Hezbollah or by Iran. But there's a lot more that are going to be killed and have been killed by Israel. This person says, Muhammad says, Hezbollah attacked and killed many in Idlib yesterday, the town of Sarmin. Hezbollah is still killing us in Syria. Yeah, this is, I need to go and confirm, like, what is the nature? Like, is it really Hezbollah that's doing it? Is it Assad? Is it, who is maintaining this conflict? The thing is that, why is there not a ceasefire agreement reached in Syria after 13 years, after almost 13 years of war and Syrians being killed, massacred right, left, and center? Why is there no ceasefire reached? And there's an answer to this question. There's a very clear answer to this question, and I'll bring it up for you right now. Why Israel can't support a ceasefire in Syria. Guess who really doesn't want a ceasefire? Go read this article in the New York Times by Shmuel Rosner. Why Israel doesn't support a ceasefire. It's not in Israel's interest for the rebels, the Syrian rebels, and Assad to reach any kind of agreement, any ceasefire agreement. Do you know how many ceasefire agreements have been attempted in the past 12 years, 13 years? They even did an analysis on it. Here's an analysis that was published in the Washington Post. Do ceasefires in Syria work? We checked the data. Our research on 10 years of truces in Syria. You can read this article from the Washington Post. And it says very clearly that there are ceasefires, but they're always broken. Like, one side will violate it. And what that indicates is there are groups, you know, what will happen is that there will be a ceasefire and then suddenly there's a massacre, or someone walks into a Alawi village on the Assad side, or they go into a Sunni village on the rebel side and they commit a massacre. And the ceasefire is broken. I wonder who could be doing that. Who benefits from just every single ceasefire being broken? And this article is talking about like, it's not just one or two. We're talking about 100 different ceasefires and why they never last. So you can go, and sometimes there's ceasefires that are just limited by nature. Sometimes there are ceasefires that are supposed to be countrywide, and then they get broken. Why? Don't you think that the two sides in this war want to reach an agreement? Don't you think that that's in their interest? Do you think like they're not all losing people? Do you think the people in Assad's army that are 40% Sunni, by the way, Assad's army is at least 40% Sunni. Some say even more than 40%, 70%. Do you think that they want the war to continue? No matter how many atrocities that they've committed, more than the other side, there's still women and children on the Assad side that also have been killed, have also fallen into the fray. So this isn't a stream about the Syrian war. We can get into that. We can do a stream on that. But this idea that, oh, it's just Sunnis that are sitting ducks and Assad is just dropping bombs on them constantly, that's happening in certain places. And we condemn it. And I, condemn Bashar al-Assad many times. And I even takfired him. He's not even a Muslim. And I've done that. But the point is that why isn't a ceasefire able to be reached? Who is preventing that? We have all of these forces. You want to talk about Iran involved in Syria? What do you think Saudi's involvement has been in Syria? What do you think the UAE's involvement has been in Syria? What has the US and Russia been doing? Turkey with the Kurds in the northeast. Who doesn't want Syria to be a stable country? Answer me that question. Is it the Syrians themselves? It's Assad. Assad just wants perpetual war because he wants to exterminate all the Sunnis. Like, is that really what you think? So I'm 100% on board condemning Assad, condemning the atrocities committed by him and Hezbollah. 100% agreed. No dispute on that. Can we look at the situation beyond those points, though? Can we analyze the situation beyond those points, or no? We just have to scream and shout and rip our clothes nonstop. The sectarianism is an attempt to split the front. That's what I can see. Rahim says, I've never felt such disgust in my fellow men as I have in this past year. A'udhu billah. Yeah, it's very depressing. But we just turn to Allah. We seek Allah's aid in everything. Let's see. Some of these comments are going to take us into big tangents. Fight Zionism by becoming a better Muslim. Well, inshallah. Thoughts on Pezeshkian, the president of Iran? I mean, what's been going viral, I don't know if it's true or not, the claim that the U.S. promised Iran, if they delay their retaliation for the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, that they will basically give Iran certain benefits, like lifting sanctions and actually agreeing to a ceasefire with Palestine. And Pezeshkian says that, oh, but they lied. Like, that makes you look really stupid if that's true. This might be just Israeli propaganda, that the Iranians were so stupid that they just agreed to U.S. promises. So, I don't know who these people are. Many Sunni Muslims are so naive and tribal. They cannot see the bigger geopolitical picture. What they accuse the Shia of, they have done worse in Iraq, Bahrain, and Yemen. Not justifying from an atheist. Okay, so an atheist says that, well, Sunnis have also committed many crimes. It's true. I mean, it's very true. Like, Saddam was allied with the Sunni powers in his country, and there are many Shia that were massacred. So that's the thing. Like, that's what I keep emphasizing, is that there are two sides to the equation. Even if quantitatively you say the Shia are worse because of what has happened in Syria, it's not like we're saying Sunnis have never committed any kind of atrocities against the Shia, and we're just so happy to have Shia living in Iraq and Syria, and we're not going to touch a hair on their heads. No, their masajid have also been bombed. Who's bombing their masajid? Who celebrates the bombing of their masajids? So a lot of these Sunni groups, I don't know why it can't be acknowledged. Like, why is it so difficult to acknowledge that this is a seemingly intractable situation? Because from outside, they are inflaming war between Sunnis and Shia to maintain this nonstop civil war, no ceasefire, no agreements, no alliance, so that our enemies can do whatever they want to us. Weaken us so that we are defenseless when they come in and take over. Like, it's very shocking. Why can't Muslims be coordinated like Zios? Good question. This is not exactly irrelevant, but sometimes I feel like my soul is leaving my body and I can't move. I see Jannah and even the Hur al-Ain, even touching them, which drives me crazy. Can this be from Shaitan? I'm always asking Allah to guide me and crying. Don't know who to ask. Am I crazy? Do you mean, like, this sounds like you're having a episode, like you can't move, like maybe it's a dream, but maybe consult with a Raqi, like someone who is an expert in these kinds of issues. They can do ruqya on you, recite Quran over you, and give you more details. I've never heard of a case like this. So may Allah make it easy for you and protect you. Let's see. Do I think the ground invasion will bring World War III? Yeah, I mean, we're on the brink of World War III. And why I'm concerned about that is the effect that it'll have on Muslims. The previous world wars had disastrous effects for the Muslims. Again, like, we have to understand history. World War I saw the end of the Ottoman Caliphate and the division of the the Caliphate into these isolated countries. The end of World War II saw the founding of the State of Israel. So if World War III, like, is that going to break the pattern? Suddenly it's going to be a great situation for Muslims? Assalamu alaikum. I believe I heard you say that you consider Shias Muslim. What are your arguments countering those that takfir them? I gave those arguments. Some of them, I didn't give a full presentation. If people are interested, let me know in the comments. We can have a full breakdown, but it's not my position. This is the majority position of Sunni ulama, that the Shia are not, you can't mass takfir them. It's a case-by-case basis because the Shia are highly diverse and their beliefs evolve over time. Now, the Shia today are much closer to Sunnis than Shia were 100 years ago or 200 years ago. There's been a Sunnification process of Shia in the past 50 years. But a lot of the statements that were made against Shia in the past are no longer relevant because those doctrines are no longer held by the majority of the Shia. So these are things that have to be understood. And if you're just blindly sectarian, you can't do proper research. You can't properly understand, well, what did the majority of Sunni ulama say? Hit the like button. I agree. Thank you, Miso. Uh, Yeah, forget Gaza. I'm a veteran of the Manhaj wars of 2024. Clown face. Yeah, these people are clowns. Uh, okay, I have to go prepare for the debate that's upcoming, so I can't read some of these longer super chats. I appreciate it though. As for all those claiming Syria, Assad, Sunni, blah, 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 read Aaron Matei's work. He exposes U.S., Israeli, ISIS, Al-Qaeda hand in chemical attacks and other atrocities. Yeah, there's a lot that can be read there for sure. Yeah, here's a revealing comment. Allah destroys our enemies with each other and we're not allowed joy for that. Most Salafi Imams already criticize Hamas for taking Shia aid. Yeah, so there you go. These are consistent. These are Medkhalis, by the way. These are the Muslim Zionists that nonstop for this past year have been attacking the Palestinian resistance and accusing them of being deviants, accusing them of being Ahlul Bid'ah, Ikhwan, etc. So these are these Salafi Imams that are criticizing Hamas and the Palestinian resistance. They're Zionists. They're the Zionists that we're talking about. But the people who are not necessarily criticizing Hamas or the Palestinian resistance, but want to criticize Hezbollah, they're the ones who are inconsistent. They're criticizing me, but they won't dare raise a peep against the Palestinian resistance. This is a very nice comment from our brother Farhad. Khuda hafezet kone aziza. May Allah bless and protect you and your family and make us followers of the Mahdi. Amin. Shia are a closed group like Jews and will only decrease. Your Iranian Sunni brother and homeschooler of 4 kids from Canada. Appreciate you, brother. But you make a very nice dua, but also the point that you're making that Shia are increasingly, they're either becoming Sunni, many of them, or they're becoming Sunnified. Their positions are getting closer to Sunni positions. So why can't we do dawah to them like we do dawah to any other group and help them draw closer? So even if they don't become Sunni, they're still closer aligned to Sunnis, and we can form a block in the case of this existential threat, which is the Zionist threat. It's like so logical. Brother, everyone is super focused on the sectarian nonsense. They're unwilling to zoom out and see what is actually going on. Yeah, I agree. If you do zoom out and you see what is going on in the bigger picture, then you realize that it's really dire. Like, I don't know about you, but it's horrifying. Like, it's hard not to be black-pilled if you just contemplate what they are planning to do. But having the Middle East completely controlled by Zionism, having Masjid al-Aqsa destroyed, having the Haramain controlled, who can come and who can go. By the way, that's clearly indicated in Hadith. The indication is that the forces of DAJJAL are going to control everywhere except DAJJAL will not be able to enter Mecca and Medina. So he cannot enter them into those cities. There's angels that are going to be protecting those cities. But that implies that everywhere surrounding them is going to be controlled by the DAJJAL, by the forces of the Antichrist. So if you control the surrounding, that means you control who comes in and out. So that's happening. Like the gears are in motion to make that a reality. Here's Imam Ghazali says you can't blindly say Shia are kafir, and he lived during a time where Shia were more extreme. Do you have a reference? That'd be great if we can add that to the reference. But I'm not surprised. Like most of the Sunni ulama had this position. Most of them had this position. So I don't understand people who claim to be traditionalists. They claim to care so much about the Islamic tradition. You have a view that is the dominant position of Sunni ulama in history, and then you just ignore it. And you think that, oh, Daniel is causing fitna and division because he says that allying with Shia is necessary. He doesn't know that they're all kuffar. What? So this mass confusion. That's the name of our time, is a time of confusion and deception. So anyway, I appreciate everyone's super chats. I have to go, so I can't read all of them. I tried to read a diverse amount of questions that, or super chats that were supporting, and some that were arguing against my position. So hopefully you found that fair-handed. But inshallah, we can talk more about these issues in future Haqiqat shows, because this is going to be ongoing. It seems like things are only going to escalate, and there might be a time limit on how long we can have a channel even, because censorship is ramping up. May Allah bless all of you and protect all of you. May Allah protect the ummah. May Allah give us the vision to see what is in front of us, and the basira to be able to see what's going to come. May Allah protect the Muslims of Palestine. May Allah protect the Muslims of Lebanon and Muslims throughout the world, in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran. May Allah protect all of the ummah and destroy the oppressors and destroy the forces of shaitan. May Allah accept your prayers and your dua. Please make dua for me and all of your brothers and sisters, inshallah. Catch me on the debate that's coming up in a couple of hours on Rumble, on Sneako's channel. I think you'll enjoy that. And until the next Haqiqat show, inshallah, I bid you assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.